Perhaps, like many of you, I'm very concerned over what the future holds for our children and our grandchildren. The German theologian Dietrich Bonhoeffer once said, "The ultimate test of a moral society lies in the kind of world that it leaves to its children." Today I see us, and I'm involved in as well, arguing politics and policies and personalities, and often we resort to sarcasm, maybe even name calling, trying to make a point or win an argument. And as I look at this, I think how foolish we really are. What we should really consider and the essence of who we truly are lies in the words of Bonhoeffer. What kind of a world will we leave to our children? The next election, I believe, will be monumental in determining what kind of a world we leave to our children. I'd like to share some facts with you. Some are party related, some are not. I'd just like you to consider the moral consequences of the decisions that you will make in November. Mitch Albom, who's a fairly well-known writer for the Detroit Free Press, recently, and when I say recently, it was a couple months ago, wrote an article that questioned opening our society because it would cause more deaths, and every death means a terrible loss for somebody somewhere. He appealed to our compassion. He appealed to our morality. He indicted our president and those who supported opening our society. He obviously considered this a great moral dilemma because at the time, over 100,000 lives had been lost to COVID-19. Now, I'd like you to consider these facts. According to the World Population Review statistics, there were just over 881,000 abortions in the U.S. in 2019. Presently, according to Worldometer's live statistics, there are about 190,000 deaths to COVID-19. However, the latest CDC report says that only 6% of this total, or around 11,400, really died from COVID, because the other 94% of the deaths all had more than one comorbidity and died with COVID, not from it. Consider then that California alone had 157,330 abortions in 2019. That's almost 14 times as many deaths to infants in the womb in California as deaths from COVID in the entire United States. Yet we hear no moral outrage for these helpless, innocent victims, nor probably will we. Again, from the World Population Review, in California, 24% of all pregnancies end in abortion, death. That's 1/4, 1/4 of possible births, possible lives are aborted. In the state of New York, there had been 119,940 abortions. 33% of all pregnancies in New York end in intentional infant death. 1/3 of all pregnancies in New York ended in abortion. In New York City, abortions outnumber live births. In New Jersey, 30% of all pregnancies end in abortion. Does any of this sound like the behavior of a moral society? Bear in mind that 93% of all abortions are for social reasons, not to protect the mother's health or because of rape or incest. Only 1% of all abortions are done because of rape or incest. We are telling our children it's okay for them to kill the child in their bodies. We are telling them that because the child is alive inside their bodies, that it is a part of their body, which it is not. The baby is a separate individual human being with its own separate body. The mother is feeding the unborn baby, nourishing this separate individual life. We are telling our children they have a moral right to kill these babies because they are alive inside of them. Abortion at any time of a pregnancy is literally murder. A baby's heart beats 18 to 21 days after fertilization, before the mother misses her first period and even knows she's pregnant. Brain waves occur as early as 40 days after fertilization. The majority of abortions occur at about 7 to 10 weeks or 49 to 70 days after fertilization. The most common surgical abortion for these first trimester abortions is called a D&C and involves dismembering the baby's body with a sharp cutting-edge suction tube and collecting the fetal parts, placenta, etc. in a bottle. A baby aborted at this time of pregnancy and in this fashion already has brain waves, a beating heart, fingers, arms, legs, genitals, and a human face. How can we as a nation support and condone this? Surgical abortions to children as old as 24 weeks or second trimester abortions called D&E are similar but more horrific. In these abortions, the limbs are torn from the baby's bodies by forceps with sharp metal jaws. The head is crushed and removed piece by piece. Then all the baby's parts are collected and reassembled like a puzzle to make sure all the pieces are removed and none remain in the mother's body. After 20 weeks, an unborn child is able to survive outside the womb. The child can hear, the child can taste, and the child feels pain. The U.S. is just one of 7 countries in the whole world that allows for these painful abortions after 5 months. And in America, we allow for any reason. Abortions of babies in the 3rd trimester or partial birth abortions are similar to D&E, but are more gruesome and barbaric. In these abortions, the abortionist reaches into the uterus and with a forceps pulls the baby by its legs into the birth canal, except for the head, which is left in the womb. At this point, the baby is alive. Then, the abortionist jams the scissors into the back of the baby's skull and spreads the tip of the scissors to enlarge the wound. After removing the scissors, a suction catheter is inserted into the skull and the baby's brains are sucked out and the collapsed head is then removed from the uterus. Babies have been delivered and survived at 23 weeks. Some pro-abortion politicians even refuse to support legal protections for babies born alive after failed abortions, leaving these babies to die. Late-term abortions are far more prevalent than abortion advocates would have you believe. In 2017, in Michigan alone, there were 3,461 abortions in the 2nd and 3rd trimesters. There were more abortions after 20 weeks in Michigan, 434, than gun homicides, 417. Isn't it time for Americans to stand up and speak for these helpless, innocent lives in a proactive, protective manner? Alexis de Tocqueville said this of this young American republic: "Not until I went into the churches of America and heard her pulpits aflame with righteousness did I understand the secret of her genius and power. America is great because she is good. And if America ever ceases to be good, she will cease to be great." Can we really call abortion an example of goodness or righteousness? Isn't abortion really murder? And isn't murder evil? The words attributed to Edmund Burke apply today perhaps more than ever. The only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is that good men do nothing. For Christians, abortion should be unacceptable. Believing that we are created in the image of God and that the child in the womb is a gift from our loving Father mandates against killing that child. Yet we fortunately know that that same loving Father recognizes that we often fall short of his expectations, and that if we sincerely seek his forgiveness, he will grant it. God does care how we vote. He doesn't want us to compartmentalize our faith. Our lives and our voting should be to the glory of Jesus Christ, who loved us, died for us, and yes, created us. How can we vote for laws and people who defy his will? I ask you this. What if Planned Parenthood, with all its resources, rather than promoting abortion, worked with pro-life and other charitable organizations to make giving birth and adoption an economic and reasonable solution to unwanted, untimely, and unaffordable pregnancies? What if we, as a nation and society, taught our children that life in the womb was a responsibility to nourish and to protect, and not a right to dictate and determine life and death? Perhaps America could once again witness to the world as de Tocqueville recognized its goodness and its righteousness. When you vote in November, I'd like you to consider these facts. According to the draft platform of the Democratic National Committee, released in late July, if Biden wins, the Democrats will require taxpayer funding of abortion on demand through all 9 months of pregnancy, up until birth. They will restore federal funding of Planned Parenthood, and they will work to overturn state-level pro-life laws. Consider that the Democratic governor of New York, Governor Cuomo, when speaking about the decrease in numbers of COVID in New York, said, and I quote, "The number is down because we brought that number down. God did not do that. Faith did not do that." That from a man who lit up the New York City skyline in pink to celebrate legalized abortion up to the moment of birth and is financing it through taxpayers' money. That from a man who said at a pandemic news conference, and I again quote, "I did everything we could do. This is about saving lives. If everything we do saves just one life, I'll be happy." Yet, abortions in New York City outnumber births. Consider that in March, when Congress came together to pass an emergency bill to help Americans with financial relief during the pandemic, Nancy Pelosi tried to hide $1 billion, that's $1 billion in funding for Planned Parenthood, in the 1,000-page document. The Democratic Speaker of the House wanted $1 billion for abortions in a bill that was intended to help Americans financially during our pandemic. Her state, California, leads the nation in abortion facilities with 512. That's more than twice the number of facilities of the state with the second most. Consider this. Joe Biden and his running mate, Kamala Harris, both support abortion on demand. Consider the Democratic governor of Michigan, Gretchen Whitmer, passionately explained during the coronavirus pandemic that, and I quote, all of her actions will save lives. Yet she closed down virtually every single surgical and outpatient facility in the state of Michigan. She closed churches. She forbid family members from visiting their dying mothers and fathers. Yet she still kept abortion facilities open. She has promised to veto any bill to limit D&E abortions. Those are dismemberment abortions. Those are abortions that from 3 to 6 months in pregnancy tear the limbs off babies and crush their skulls so they can be vacuumed out. As you prepare to vote in November, consider your moral responsibility, if not to your God, then to the generations that will follow you. Again, quoting Dietrich Bonhoeffer, silence in the face of evil is itself evil. God will not hold us guiltless. Not to speak is to speak. Not to act is to act. Your vote is your way of speaking. Your vote is your way of acting. Our country has been the model for democracy worldwide for over 2 centuries. And make no mistake about it, it was and is democracy that has afforded us to be what we are today, even with all our faults as we're witnessing across our country. It is still a country that allows us to freely vote. It is a country that people all over the world immigrated to, a country that people all over the world are still immigrating to, legally and illegally. It was for this democracy that millions of men and women fought and died. It was this democracy that Alexis de Tocqueville so admired when he wrote these words. Democracy extends the sphere of individual freedom. Socialism restricts it. Democracy attaches all possible value to each man. Socialism makes each man a mere agent, a mere number. Democracy and socialism have nothing in common but one word, equality. But notice the difference. While democracy seeks equality and liberty, socialism seeks equality in restraint and servitude. I urge you, in November, vote for life. Vote for democracy.